for today's webinar. We're going to give it another minute or two for others to join. We do see some people coming in right now, so if you just bear with us, we'll begin in about another minute or two. Thank you. So thank you everyone for joining us. We are going to go ahead and begin today's presentation. Bernita, if you would like to go ahead and give the introduction on the series, that would be great.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bernita James from the Public Housing Office at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, headquarters in Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for the 16th webinar in the Energy is Everywhere webinar series. This series is the result of an interagency collaboration between HUD, the Department of Energy, and Education. And this recording and presentation will be available on the Energy is Everywhere website following this presentation in the next few days. This series has been going since October 2014, and all past presentations are also available on the Energy is Everywhere website. Our goal is to increase energy literacy, STEM training, and opportunities for job-driven skills training for public housing and low-income community residents. The topic for today will be spring energy saving tips, and it will be conducted by one of our partners at the Department of Energy. Our presenter is Madeline Saltzman. Madeline Saltzman works at the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, focused on residential energy efficiency projects. Prior to her work for DOE, she worked on home energy use with various organizations in Missouri, Arkansas, and rural India. Now a Master of Public Service candidate for the Clinton School of Public Service, she received her Bachelor of Arts from Washington University in St. Louis in Environmental Studies and Architecture. I would just like to remind everyone that they will be placed on mute for the duration of the presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat, and we will take your questions at the end. So, Maddie, if you are ready, we would be very interested to hear what you have to say about energy-saving tips.
Great. Thank you for the introduction, Bernita. I appreciate it. And yeah, as Bernita mentioned, just if you have any questions throughout, feel free to put them in the chat box, but I will get to those at the end. So feel free to do that throughout, but I won't answer them right away. As Bernita said, my name is Madeline Salzman, and I work for the Department of Energy on residential building programs. And I'm here to help out with the energy literacy part of the SEED program in utilizing resident engagement toolkits for your residents. So this webinar is actually the second in a series within the Energy is Everywhere webinar series. So utilizing this toolkit that you can see kind of the front page pictured here, that was developed by Stewards for Affordable Housing for the Future. You can actually access the whole toolkit for free on that link provided, and you can have access to this webinar later, so you can check it out on your own if you'd like. And so this webinar is going to go over just a small portion of this toolkit, actually. So we're focused on spring strategies for reducing energy use and focusing primarily on lighting. But the overall toolkit goes over behavior to reduce water use and encourage healthy living strategies as well. And as I mentioned, everything available in that toolkit, both mentioned here and in our other webinars, is available for free online. So I definitely recommend checking it out if you have not already. And so basically a key component of utilizing a toolkit to engage your residents is to be engaging and to really think critically about what that means for your community. You want to ask yourself questions like, what are people in your community looking for? What concerns do they have? What makes them come out to an event? You know, best practices tend to include things like snacks and refreshments. Even just really light refreshments can make a big difference to making people feel welcome at an event and getting them to actually come in the door. Also having printed out materials, just let people know that this is an event that you're putting on for people to feel engaged. It's not just a lecture, and it's, you know, a way for people to interact. Also, part of being engaging means listening and hearing what residents have to say, what things they're concerned about. Throughout this whole presentation, we'll go over a bunch of different strategies, and you'll have to think, okay, are the residents paying for the electricity themselves, or is that something that the property management is paying for, and how does that affect how successful certain activities will be? Some activities will be better in situations where residents are paying for the electricity themselves, and others will work better for property management. So these are all things to just keep in mind throughout this webinar and going through the toolkit itself. And last thing, just to make sure you keep things fun and take advantage of events and holidays and current events going around in your area. So really quickly, I mentioned that this webinar goes over lighting strategies, and I just wanted to address a little bit why we are going over that in this particular webinar. So of course, this is the spring webinar on the toolkit, and probably the biggest, most important thing that happens this spring, the reason why the season exists at all, is because the sun is out longer. And so this is a great time to not be using your lighting equipment the same way you would be using it in the winter when the sun is low in the sky and just not even out for as much of the day. So it's a great time to kind of be thinking more about lighting and to think about ways that you can be reducing your use. Also, in the winter webinar, which is available on the Energy is Everywhere website, we talked about how you want to keep curtains closed to keep heat in. Well, now, as it starts to get a little bit warmer out, oh, I think it's still good. So as it starts to get warmer outside, losing heat in your home is less of a concern than it was before. So just things you want to be thinking about throughout this time period. And so lighting is also a great strategy for residents because it's very empowering for people. It's an area that you have a lot of control over, right? It doesn't require somebody in some faraway place changing the energy use or switching to solar panels, which is also great, but just not something that residents feel like they have control over. But we all know that we have the power to turn lights on and off and to switch out a light bulb. Those are very easy things generally for people to take on and feel like they're making a difference. And another great thing about focusing on lighting is it really does make a difference. Lighting typically accounts for about 15% of electricity use, but that is dependent dramatically on what type of technology is being used. So when we kind of picture a light bulb in our heads, most of us picture an incandescent light bulb, which is the ones that have kind of the clear glass outside and a little wire inside. In that first column you see here. And these are kind of the beginning of the evolution for lighting technology. So you can think of, I guess, coming before the incandescent bulb are things like candles and kerosene lamps that were used for lighting before. And the light bulb was great because it took smoke that's used to create the light and brought it outside of the home. That was a really big step forward for public health. But we've also had evolution in lighting technology since the time of the incandescent bulb, and we're seeing even more efficient technologies today. So what this chart goes over is the lifespan of these bulbs. You'll notice an incandescent bulb lasts usually around 1,200 hours versus a CFL. You guys might recognize it from the photo here, but usually kind of a swirly pattern. Those tend to last for 8,000 hours, and then LEDs are kind of the newest in lighting technology, and they kind of have a metal appearance around the sides and then more of a plastic front usually rather than glass, and those tend to last for 50,000 hours, so significantly longer than your average incandescent bulb. The next row talks about lumens per watt. So the amount of light or the brightness of a bulb is measured in lumens, and then the amount of energy needed to create that light is measured in watts. So for 1 watt of energy going in, for an incandescent bulb, you only get 13 lumens out, whereas you're going to get about 4.5 times the amount of light out per that same amount of energy for a compact fluorescent light, or the CFL. And you're going to get about 10 times as much light for an LED for the same amount of energy put in. So you can see that correlates exactly to the energy use and the operating costs related for these different lighting strategies. Whatever amount of money you spend and energy you consume on an incandescent bulb, you could get the same amount of light out for 75% cheaper, or different measurements slightly for 77% cheaper with a CFL bulb, or up to 90% cheaper and less energy for an LED. So this is an area for not only people to feel like they have a lot of control, because it's very easy for them to change out their light bulbs, but it really is an area where they can make a huge difference. You can see these impacts on your electricity bill just after changing light bulbs pretty easily. So the way we go through the toolkit, is based on dividing up the different strategies the SAFE Toolkit provides into 3 different categories. And so the first is building knowledge, and this is based off of a theory of social change for engaging residents, where first you focus on building knowledge, then encourage changing behavior, and then pushing for social change. If you're trying to do activities out of order and things, it might mean that people don't understand why they are doing something. And if they don't understand why they're doing it, they're less likely to actually participate. And why they do it can be anything from because they care about the environment or reducing energy to saving money or living more comfortably in their home. So you want to make sure those things are being communicated early. So for March, the plan is to build knowledge, and so these particular exhibits from the toolkit focus on how to do that. So in order to actually build knowledge among your residents, all of you also need to know good strategies for saving energy on lighting. So kind of the easiest ones to begin with involve resident behavior, so turning the lights off. And to me, one of the biggest misconceptions with this perspective is that by turning the lights off, we mean you need to sit at home in the dark. And that's not really what we want either. It's about having people be comfortable in their homes. So there's a lot of strategies you can do to take advantage of natural light. Like I said, this is the spring webinar, so take advantage of the fact that the sun is higher in the sky and out longer during the day. You want to make sure that you clean your windows. It's amazing how just a little bit of dirt on the window can really be keeping out lots of sunlight. And you want to trying to keep the windows and blinds open. Of course, if too much light, you can close them, but if by opening those windows you get access to that natural lighting. I also recommend using a power strip if you have multiple lights in a room, because it's usually easier to flip that switch. I know a lot of us, it can be difficult going to bed at night. You have 4 different lights on in a room to actually go and to each individual one and turn it off, but this way it gets a little bit easier. And also to keep your lampshade the light color. This might sound kind of strange, but if you have a black lampshade over a light, you're getting a lot less light out of that lamp than you could be if it were white. There's also strategies that either residents can take up or that property management can take up. So it's better for lighting if you paint your walls a light reflective color. Now this doesn't mean you have mirrored walls. It means that you use a bright white paint or a bright color tone that is going to actually reflect light around the room and not make the room feel darker. So if you're looking to kind of repaint some of the rooms anyway, that's something to keep in mind. Also privacy blinds and frosted windows. So you can see frosted windows in this picture here. Those are really great if you're working in an area where there's high population density and high building density. A lot of people keep their blinds closed because they're concerned about people being able to see in. And so if that's a concern in your community, consider ways that you can kind of let light in without making it too visible to the outside. So yeah, frosted windows are, I think, kind of a nice solution for that in certain areas that are often underutilized. You walk around in cities and see blinds closed all the time when you could have frosted windows instead. And then if you're looking at fixing any of the lighting in a space, you want to try to use low-hanging lights or, like, for instance, a desk lamp rather than high-up lights, because a light that is high up in your space is actually lighting up a ton more space than you actually need. You often just need a light close to your desk or close to a countertop to really get work done or whatever's happening in that space, and you don't need kind of the entire room illuminated. And then other things to keep in mind for maintenance, of course, we've mentioned the light bulbs. I wouldn't necessarily recommend going through and switching out every single light bulb that maybe was just purchased, but especially, I mean, the lowest of the low-hanging fruit is that if a light bulb burns out, replace it with a much more efficient one. You can go through and kind of do a cost evaluation to see if it makes sense to do an overhaul of lighting completely. But you know, is it worth it to throw away a completely good piece of technology? Probably not. But if you need to replace lighting anyway, go with more efficient lighting. And then the last one I have on here is to install occupancy sensors in common spaces. So the sensors work so that anytime the room is empty for a certain amount of time or there's no motion in the room, the lights will automatically turn off. So kind of the low-cost way to go about this is to start off in common spaces where there's maybe a lot of lights hooked up to that system, and if you have maybe a grant to install more, or if you're interested in installing more, another one can be like public bathrooms or closet spaces, or spaces that just tend to be used a little less frequently. So this is the first of the SAFE toolkit items that we will go through in this webinar. So this is Exhibit 420, and I referenced the list on the March Building Knowledge slide, 2 slides ago. So you can kind of keep along with that. But so this one addresses various behaviors people can take up, and so energy is one of the things that they're considering on this poster. But they're, like I mentioned, the SAFE toolkit goes through water use as well. So this poster does a great job of addressing both of those areas. And yeah, it's a message for spring in terms of dealing with spring cleaning and trying to reduce water use and things like that. So this is a great poster that can really go anywhere. So this is Exhibit 425, and these are just some examples of a coloring book that's provided in the toolkit for kids, and just an easy way for kids to kind of get engaged early on. You can, teach them a little, like for a few minutes what the picture is about, and then they have a little activity to do as well. And then this next one is an educational poster. It's Exhibit 5-8, and this illustrates how the wattage outputs compare between the CFL bulbs and the incandescent bulbs. It focuses on these two because these tend to be the cheapest ones that are most accessible for people to purchase in stores. We'll go a little bit more into financing later, but just an easy way for residents to see, perhaps at an event or outside the property management office, how these two things relate. And then this is an activity to see how much energy different appliances use, and it's much more information intensive rather than necessarily a poster, but it's a good handout to have for people or an activity to put together just to kind of explain how you can carry out the energy use of a product people likely have in their home, all the way to how often you use it, and then how much that will impact the cost over the course of a year of using that appliance. So for April, we've gone kind of beyond the building knowledge component of the toolkit and focused more on easy ways to change behavior. And so the main focus here, you can kind of see with the names of the exhibits, is focusing on changing light bulbs. And one thing I'd also like to recommend, especially for the month of April, in terms of coordinating with holidays, is April 22nd is Earth Day. And I mean, that event is just asking for lots of different types of sustainability projects, and so April can be a good time to utilize this toolkit and to get people to commit or pledge to use more sustainable behaviors, and this can be one of them. So the first one is Exhibit 421, which is an educational handout to teach people about switching to CFL bulbs from incandescent bulbs. You can give this to people on an event or leave it outside their doors, whichever is kind of easiest for you. And then this should go on the back of the other, either on the back of the previous handout, or it should go, if you're going to do an event where you are able to hand out CFLs to people, you should give this with the light bulb itself. So you might have heard some concerns about mercury content in CFL bulbs. So this is generally not an issue unless the CFL is broken. It's completely contained in the bulb itself, but there's always a chance that the CFL can break, and then in which case you just want to make sure that you clean it up very carefully, and ideally children should not be the ones to clean it up, which hopefully is obvious because it's broken glass, but it's also mercury, which can impact childhood development. So, I mean, the number one thing to tell people is to try to not break it, because as long as it's not broken, the mercury is entirely contained. But if it's broken, you want to make sure your residents know how to clean it up appropriately. And also, if you hear other concerns about the mercury content or people being concerned about using CFLs generally, one thing I usually like to tell people, not only is the mercury content contained within the bulb of a CFL, but it's very low. And actually, if you look at the energy consumption difference between an incandescent bulb and a CFL bulb, you overall save much more mercury exposure by reducing energy use, because electricity production also produces mercury. So you actually save mercury by using CFLs compared to incandescents. The difference here is that if it were to break and, you know, on your kitchen floor, then it's in your house. So that's why we try to not break them. And then this is a newsletter insert. So this is Exhibit 424, and you can use it to engage your staff and also your residents in actions they can take regarding lighting. And so either if you have a printed newsletter or maybe an online newsletter, and this can kind of go in the corner. And this fits also with some of the other strategies, the conservation corner piece that we talked about in the winter webinar as well. And then this is Exhibit 5-4, so the next few ones go together. And so this is a poster for an event where residents are given a CFL bulb, taught about the importance of it, so we get the education and the action item available there. And then residents can pledge to conserve energy in some way at this event. So this is a poster example for this. Obviously, if you were to use this one, you'd want to change the date from happening to a few years in the past. But yeah, you just kind of put in the time and date that worked for you, and then print it out so that people can come. And so, yep, then the next one is a pledge card that people can fill out to pledge to take action in some way. So of course you'd want this event coordinated in some way with education on why they should take action, right? If we just tell people to take action and they don't understand why they're doing it, they won't be very engaged in the process. So this way they can fill it out and take it home and remind themselves that this is something they've pledged to do, and the physical reminder is usually helpful for people. And then this is also, these are pledges to flick the switch. So these are where people can write their names down and add themselves to a list of having pledged to, like it says, flick the switch and keep their lights off when they're not in the room, or use natural lighting as much as possible. And so these kind of, you would print them out, cut them out, and then they would become leaves on a resident conservation pledge tree, which you can see in the next slide. Oh, well, sorry, you can't see it here. But in the next component, you would see, if you were to go to the next page within the toolkit, It includes a tree that you can print out, and then you would stick each of those on as leaves, and you would post it in some public space where people can see who has pledged to flick the switch. So even if people were not available to attend that event, they can see it at later dates and see who in their community is involved with this whole process. So aside from the tree itself, you can also use point-of-use prompts. So these you can print out and stick next to light switches that you want people to remember to turn off before they leave a room. So this could be maybe if there's a public bathroom or you know, any type of public space, or you can give to people to put in their own homes, especially if they have kids they want to remind. And so for May, like I said, we go from knowledge to behavior to social change. And so these are focused more on strategies to bring community together, and these are more resource-intensive events. So they do take more time, but luckily there are not too many exercises in the month of May, and so hopefully you know, you could dedicate a weekend day to it. So the first one is the Energy Hog Challenge, and so this is an event designed for children. It says between the ages of 6 and 12. That's kind of who the focus target is, but you can adjust that as needed for your community and thinking about what will work for your group. And this is just a way to engage kids and teach them about what appliances use a lot of energy, what are ways they can save energy. And a lot of times kids can be really great about reminding the rest of us to be good about this stuff. These are the types of things they tend to notice, and things that can often slip our minds as we're going through the day. They'll remember, hey, you should turn off the light when you leave the room. And then with the kids, there's also this scavenger hunt, which I thought was really great, where especially if there's any type of public spaces where there's many appliances, you can take kids through, and they have to figure out which ones are using the most energy and the least energy, and which things are you know, using a lot of water and where else, and find all the pieces in order to get through the scavenger hunt. And so yeah, just another way to kind of engage kids and also teach them how to save energy from those energy hogs. And so these are similar engagement tips that we went over in the winter webinar, but just to reiterate them here. Like I said, you want to take advantage of the season that people are usually doing spring cleaning. There's Earth Day, and there's you know, a lot of things going on in the world that tend to make people feel like getting involved in sustainability projects. And then there's longer evening sunlight, which is great for lighting strategies, but also just for thinking about what events you can do outside or later in the day. As always, you want to find your resident leaders. These are the people who are interested in these issues. Figure out what makes them interested, and make sure you are engaged on those issues as well. And you can really utilize these people to help you hang up signs, let residents know about events, even run events potentially, help with changing the light bulbs, things like that. And yeah, really key part is just keeping in mind what matters to your residents. You guys are the expert on all of that. I am not, so I can only give you ideas and tips, but ultimately you will know how to communicate with your residents best on this. And I tend to make this recommendation in all of my webinars. Don't take on more than you have time for. Opt to do a few simple activities well. So just make sure you take the time to really read the instructions. The toolkit that all of these tips are from really does have a ton of information in it. So if you read it carefully, there's going to be a lot of support, and you can always reach out to myself and the rest of us in the SEED program if you have questions about how to get something done, because we are here to help. But that's everything I've got in terms of the webinar for today. So if you guys have any questions about any of these strategies or other strategies, please feel free to ask away. You can also raise your hand and we can call on you.
So did anyone have any questions actually for Maddie today, or anything that they wanted to take note that we could share with the rest of the group?
Hi, Maddie. This is Bernita. I was just wondering where this toolkit can be found. You might have mentioned it earlier, but it might be worth repeating.
Yeah, definitely. So on an earlier slide, I believe slide 4 of this presentation, you can see there's a link that'll take you directly to the toolkit, and so this presentation will be posted online afterwards. But also, if you can't get access to this presentation, I know first you have to get the presentation, and then in order to get the link, if you Google search SAHF, that's what I've been saying is safe this whole time, SAHF Resident Engagement Toolkit, it's like the first thing that pops up. So that's probably the easiest way to get to it, but all of these slides have information as well.
What format does this come in? How are PHAs able to customize?
Yes, everything is editable. So the instructions manual comes as a PDF, so you can read through all kind of the theory behind the toolkit and how it's provided and everything else. And then each item of that toolkit is listed by exhibit number, and then you can look for the exhibit number and download either as a Word document or a PowerPoint. So as long as you have Microsoft Office, you should be able to edit it completely to your own needs, or even change out photos and stuff if you'd like to.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah. And to answer a question actually did come in, and they're asking if the slides would be emailed. Actually, a link to the Energy is Everywhere website, which hosts this presentation as well as previous presentations. It will be available, and the link will be sent out to everyone that was on the call or for those who did miss it. This particular presentation will probably be uploaded to that site within the next couple of days.
Yeah, great, guys. Thanks so much for listening. I appreciate it.
And then I think that is it. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead. Again, email. You can email Maddie at the email address that's on the screen if you have any particular questions or need any TA about how to do some of the stuff that she showed on the webinar today. Otherwise, I think, Bernita, if you want to go ahead and conclude the webinar for today, that would be great.
Sure. So thank you, everyone who's been able to join. I'd like to especially thank Madeline, our presenter, and Clarissa, also from Department of Energy, for providing technical assistance with the webinar. I hope that the information presented today has been helpful and has given everyone ideas on how they can best engage their residents around energy conservation. So please be sure to follow us for our webinar presentation next month. We have the Energy is Everywhere webinar on the 3rd Thursday every month. So the next one will be happening April 21st, and we'll be sending out additional information about that topic. So thank you again, and everyone enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.